Hey class, Mr. Wagner here. We're going to cover some information found on pages 388 all the way up to 391, and I think it is a little bit complicated, so I wanted to kind of walk you through this. So let's go ahead and get started. This section is about the rate of change when it comes to evolution. So the very first thing what we need to do is kind of review just a little bit of what is a species, something you should have read on the very first page of our chapter. I suppose it's good to start off with what is not a species. So a horse is a species and a donkey is a species. Notice the horse has 64 chromosomes and the donkey has 62 chromosomes. Well, can the horse and the donkey reproduce with each other? Yes, they can. And when they reproduce with each other, they make a mule. A mule has 63 chromosomes. Now, remember when we talked about mitosis and meiosis and stuff like that? Well, the thing is, when it comes to meiosis, we can't divide 63 evenly in half. And since we can't divide it evenly in half, it's unable to make the reproductive cells necessary in order for it to reproduce. So therefore, a mule is not a species because mules cannot make more mules. You cannot have several mules breed with each other to make more mules. It's impossible. You can't do that. Same thing if you had a lion and a tiger. A lion and a tiger, they don't have the same amount of chromosomes. Can a lion and a tiger breed with each other? Yes, but their offspring are not fertile. The liger cannot reproduce. The liger cannot make more examples of ligers. So therefore, a mule and a liger are not species. Well, what does that have to do with anything? Let's move on to some of the stuff in your textbook on 388 and 389. You were supposed to read about the kaibab and the Abert squirrel. And our textbook is making an argument here that we might be making a new species. So on the left, it's either the kaibab or the Abert squirrel. I'm not sure which one's which, but the theory is originally there's one generic squirrel that could essentially live in the area where the Grand Canyon was. And whenever the Grand Canyon got carved, these squirrel populations got separated. So you had one population of squirrel on the south rim of the Grand Canyon and one on the north rim of the Grand Canyon. And they can't reproduce with each other because they can't cross the Grand Canyon. So over time, due to environmental reasons, one of the squirrels got a little bit darker in color and one of the squirrels got a little bit lighter in color. And they continue and are continuing to change ever so slightly because they are not reproducing and averaging out their genetics. And the theory is that maybe in the future, these squirrels, or at least one of the squirrels, might change its genetics so much because it's adapting to its environment that it may not be able to reproduce with the squirrels on the other side of the Grand Canyon eventually, which might mean it might make a new species due to something called habitat fragmentation. And habitat fragmentation is when the habitat, the place where the organism lives, is split apart. Some other examples of habitat fragmentation are places like where an interstate crosses. You might have a population of deer on one side and a population of deer on the other side, but they can't go across the interstate to breed with each other. So that would be an example of habitat fragmentation. So that might be one way that a species can form, theoretically. The next thing that on pages 390 and 391 that our textbook talks about is the rate of evolution. There's two major ideas when it comes to the rate of evolution. Neither one of them has been proven correct or been proven wrong. But one of the major ideas is called gradualism. With gradualism, things slowly but steadily always change. It's always changing, generation after generation, just slowly and continually changing. This isn't the best graphic in the world, but I think it's the one that helps us understand the best. So we've got like the ancestor to a horse on the top, but it's towards the left, and then we've got a modern day horse on the right. And there's slow, steady, gradual changes that are slowly occurring to make the modern day horse. That's gradualism. But down below is something called punctuated equilibrium. And with punctuated equilibrium, instead of slow, steady, gradual changes, the horse essentially stays the same. We're talking maybe for potentially millions of years. No changes to the horse, it stays the same. Then some factor in its environment changes. Maybe the food that it eats, maybe the climate that it has to adapt to. And because the horse now has to adapt, that within a period of, let's say, 10,000 years, which in the grand scheme of all things isn't that long, in a period of 10,000 years, the horse makes a whole lot of changes and then stops. And then kind of just stays the way it is for a few million years. And then after that, there's another change in the environment, and then it has to change again. So think of it more like steps with punctuated equilibrium. It takes a step, and there's a whole lot of change in a short amount of time, and then it levels off, and then a whole lot of change in a short amount of time, and then it levels off, and then a whole lot of change. Whereas gradualism, you can think of more like a ramp. It's just slowly, steadily, always increasing, always changing. Which one of these is right? We don't know. However, they're both interesting theories when it comes to the idea of evolution. I thought I'd walk you through that just because it is a little bit difficult to understand on your own. Hopefully this was helpful to you. I hope you have a great day.